This show is so forking good. Now, normally I try not to do too many installments of Why It's Awesome, in too short a time span. I try and only do one a month, but having now binged my way through the second season of The Good Place, because it came out on Netflix, in anticipation of the third season, which is going to start airing very soon on the 27th, I believe, if I'm going to talk about why I love this show, this is kind of the ideal time to do it, because I'm caught up and it's about to do the new season. So let's talk about it. I'm going to go spoiler-free for as long as I can, because I'm finding, not as many people seem to know or have heard of the show as I would have thought. I mean, I don't know what the ratings are because I don't follow ratings on anything, because as long as it has ratings sufficient to get it renewed, that's literally the only thing I care about. So I don't know how well watched the show actually is, but I love it. So let's start with premise. When the show opens, episode 1, season 1, we meet Eleanor. Eleanor, played by Kristen Bell, is a woman who has died, and she has arrived in the afterlife. She has arrived in one of two places where she could possibly go. There is the good place, and there is the bad place. And Eleanor is one of the lucky few who made it to the good place. And I do mean few. There is a very high bar that is set to be able to get into the good place. What she swiftly realizes, and what is revealed to the audience, about halfway-ish into the first episode, is that there's been a mistake. She's not supposed to be in the good place, because she was kind of a terrible human being. And that's your starting premise, and it goes from there. And we meet the other characters as well. There's Michael, played by Ted Danson, who he runs the neighborhood. Now, what the neighborhood is they basically have collections of, I don't know if they give a number, but they have a collection of so many humans who qualified for the good place, and an architect, which is what Michael is, creates a neighborhood for them that is to be their ideal. Everyone gets a house that is met to their own preferences and ideal situations, and what is available to them. There is a an AI, for lack of a better term, called Janet. You say Janet, and she just shows up, and she can get and do and answer almost anything. And so there's that. They have that at their disposal. So there's Janet as well, who I love, possibly my favorite character. And then we also have some of the other residents of the neighborhood that we get focus on. There's Chiti, who is identified as Eleanor's soulmate. Now, Chiti, he was an ethics professor, and Eleanor confides in him pretty quickly that she's not supposed to be there, which sends him into a complete moral quandary. Like, oh my God, now what do I do? Because he's the kind of guy who is going to literally drive himself crazy by going, well, should I tell Michael that there's someone who isn't supposed to be here, because that would be the honest thing, and telling the truth is important, but then I am condemning this person to the bad place, and does that make it a malicious act? Should I now not do it? Like, he'll drive himself nuts with this. So that's Chiti. And while he is introduced as Eleanor's soulmate, obviously Eleanor's not who she's supposed to be, so they don't get along the way that they're supposed to. And there's another couple of soulmates who we also get an emphasis on. There is Tahani, who was a philanthropist. She was real big on, raising money for charity, and she's a bit of a name dropper. She was a hobnobber with celebrities and whatnot, but she did a lot of good stuff. And her soulmate is Janyu, who is a monk with a vow of silence. Now, I am going to get to a little bit more detail on some of the things that happen to these characters when I start talking about what I really like about them, but some of that is considered spoilers. So if you've never seen the show at all, this is the point at which I would say I really love it. I love the actors are all great. It's incredibly clever the way it progresses. It does have a continually progressive story. It doesn't reset to zero at the end of every episode. So it is a continuing narrative, and it pulls that off while remaining funny and clever and true to its characters from start to finish as far as I've gotten into it, the complete first 2 seasons. So that is my recommendation for you to go and watch it. Now, if you feel like you need a little bit more of a nudge, I'm going to start talking about some of the character developments and things that we find out into the first season. When I get to like the legitimate spoilers of stuff that happens later, I'll give you another warning because that'll be your final one. So, coming back to Jian Yu, it might seem weird that like there's a focus on just a silent monk. What is there to do with this guy? Well, Jian Yu, is, like Eleanor, is also not who he appears to be. There was a mix-up with him as well, and he is not a Buddhist monk. He is a Floridian moron named Jason. And Jason, my God, Jason is amazing. Jason is a level of stupid that it took me a little while to warm to him. I had a hard time buying him because he is so dumb. Like, it is incredible how stupid he is. I mean, he was smart enough to realize that if he held up the vow of silence, facade, that he wouldn't get in trouble, and he wouldn't have to answer questions and admit that he has no idea what's going on. And so he knew enough to do that, but that's about it. That's about the limits of his intelligence. And sort of what's amazing about Jason is it's really hard to make a character that stupid and who is frequently very annoying to the other characters endearing. Because generally when you make a character who by design is annoying to the other characters in your story, they tend to also be annoying to the audience. See Jar Jar Binks is a pretty solid example of that. So what works about Jason is that he does actually have a good heart. He's usually too dumb to think through the consequences of anything he does, both in terms of what it'll mean to him and its possible impact on anybody else. Like, he's the kind of guy who would get it in his head, oh, I want to go to this club. I don't have a car. And he would hotwire somebody's car to drive there, not thinking, oh, you dumbass, I'll steal your car. Just like, oh, it's just sitting there. I'll take it. This is great. Like, not with malice, but just like a complete disregard for the impact of anything he ever does or says or thinks. He is an adorable dumbass. And I'm surprised that I've taken a shine to him the way that I have. And as far as some of the other characters go, for me, Ted Danson he was my initial sort of interest point because I love Ted Danson. I love Cheers. Ted Danson has a great inherent likability to him. And actually the part of Michael is really difficult because what Michael is, especially in the first season, he's an exposition machine. He's there to tell Eleanor and, by extension the audience, what's going on, how stuff works. Yeah, he's honestly even more of an exposition machine than Janet, who is a literal exposition machine. And it's really hard to take a character whose purpose is to just dump information and make them somebody you like to watch. Because generally you're like, oh, okay, look, just get through the explanation, okay, so we can move things forward. But he makes it enjoyable. It's a skill that he has. It's a skill that Anthony Stewart Head as Giles on Buffy the Vampire Slayer had. Some people can do it, but it's really hard. It's really hard to just be the guy with all the answers and have that be somebody who you enjoy. So he's great at that. Kristen Bell, I do have a soft spot for Kristen Bell. I actually haven't seen her in a ton of live action stuff, to be honest, but I enjoyed this because Kristen Bell as a performer has a bubbliness to her, has just sort of a friendliness in a way, inherently. Like, as a person, I get that vibe off her. So to see her play somebody so unapologetically awful, like, unlike, say, Jason, who does not have any appreciation for what anything he does means, Eleanor makes deliberate choices that hurt people, knowing it's going to hurt other people, and she doesn't care. or maybe even finds it funny. So she is a horrible human being. And again, it's really impressive that they take someone that despicable, because she is. She really is. And make them someone you root for. Make them somebody that you care about. Honestly, all these characters are characters that it feels like almost a cast that was come up in a writing exercise of, here are the templates of characters that almost never work. Do a story with nothing but that. So you have the horrible person that you are expected to sympathize with, the exposition machine who is still fun to be around, the dumbass who's not annoying to the audience, the indecisive character that as an audience member you enjoy his indecisiveness, but it doesn't make you want to strangle him. The stuck-up character who you still kind of can't help but be like, you're fun to be there, but your character template is also kind of awful, but stay, do more stuff. Taking these characters that should be annoying, that should be irritating, that would be a drag on almost any other show, populating the show with almost nothing but them, and making it work, and making us like them, all of them. That's astounding, to be completely honest. And now I need to get to some real proper spoilers that are more than just a couple of episodes into the show. So if this is your last warning for like major spoilers. Okay, so end of season 1, we find out they're really in the bad place, which unfortunately I did have spoiled for me. And I had it spoiled for me in a similar way to how the Red Wedding was spoiled for me for Game of Thrones, which was that I saw like a sketch, in this case it was like a cartoon, that made reference to that. Because that was how the Red Wedding got spoiled for me when South Park did its Game of Thrones spoof, and I hadn't been watching the show yet. So this was spoiled for me in a similar manner. But it still works. It's a great reveal, and it's a great turn from Michael, and it gives Ted Danson the reveal that, yeah, he's the architect of this neighborhood, but he designed it to torture these people. Not just torture these people, but get them to torture each other. Because Eleanor throws Chiti into complete existential horror because she keeps forcing him into these moral and ethical quandaries, and he feels constantly awful. And Eleanor is surrounded by people who are literally better than her, and her entire life was spent under, thundering the idea, you're not better than me. And Tahani just keep getting one-upped by the way things are, and never quite getting satisfaction. And then she gets paired with Jason, who's just such a freaking moron. And just the way they interact and the way they drive each other crazy, and Eleanor having that realization of, oh, Michael, and realizing what he is. And Ted Danson has this awesome turn that starts with just this laugh, this which is great. Oh my God. And then watching him shift and getting to know basically Demon Michael is so much fun, especially because personality-wise, he doesn't really change. What he's after changes, and what came off initially as affection for these people, it shifts to contempt, but his general persona doesn't change. He's the same guy in terms of personality. You just get a different angle on it and go, oh, that's what was going on. Now, after that reveal, I really wondered how season 2 could pick up from that, and it picks up from it brilliantly. It starts in a way that you're like, oh, they're basically going to retread the first season, because the way season 2 starts is that Michael, after they realized at the end of season 1 what was going on, Michael wiped their memories, like, fine, we're going to start again. I'm going to make some adjustments. We're going to get this right. And then the first 2 episodes of season 2, you realize he has to keep restarting them over and over and over and over again, because they keep figuring it out. And he comes to a realization that no matter how many times he resets them, they are actually becoming better people through their interactions with each other, through what they draw from each other. And that puts Michael in a different headspace, because that's not supposed to happen. The way the system is supposed to work is where you go, good place or bad place, is determined by your actions on Earth. And that's all that determines it. Nothing that you do after you die, no matter where you end up, nothing you do after that impacts anything, because the belief is that when you die, you are who you were. You can't keep changing. You can't evolve further. But he's watching these people and going, they're changing and they're getting better. something's weird here. And he basically kind of switches sides, partly selfishly because if his boss realizes how many times he's reset this when he only got a clearance to reset it once, he's actually going to be in massive trouble and get, effectively killed. And so he's got a selfish motivation initially, but you see him evolve a genuine sense of emotion. You see him become basically more human, and he hates it so much of the time, which is wonderful to see. And there is such a cavalcade of amazing guest characters as well. Even though it's the same actress who plays Janet, I really like Bad Janet. The Bad Place version of Janet, which is ridiculous. I actually like a lot of the Bad Place figures. Trevor, who didn't come back in season 2, unfortunately. I do hope we see him again, but Trevor's the worst. And actually, there's so many characters who are the worst. Eleanor's the worst. Tahani's the worst. Trevor's the worst. But they're all distinctly different flavors of the worst, which I love that. I'm finding myself really gravitating towards characters who are the worst and who the audience are not like, oh, but they're really okay. No, these people are terrible. It's okay to have fun with them, but they're terrible. Let's be honest. I'm finding myself enjoying that. Not always, but more often than I would have thought. So Trevor I like a lot. Derek is amazing in season 2 when Janet creates a boyfriend named Derek, who is just... wow, I don't even know how to describe Derek. I can tell you, though, he has possibly my favorite line in the whole show. Maximum Derek. It's, oh, God. I could just keep going on and on. And the intelligence of this show, as it talks about real philosophical concepts and moral quandaries that have been debated by philosophers and academics for centuries, are all in here, including name drops for a lot of these guys and where these concepts come from. It's really cool how intelligently researched this is, but also the way it's continuing to progress. What they've set up for season 3 is going to demand a completely different show than we got in season 2, which already demanded a pretty notably different show than we had in season 1. This show is literally reinventing itself every single season. What it's doing from the ground up is a wholly different thing, and the way it goes about it and shifts across the season, you're like, it can't go back to what it was. And that's exciting. And it makes me both very excited and very nervous about the next season. I think that Michael Schur, who created this show, I seems to me like he has a very sound idea for what he's doing going into season 3. Past that, I'm going to be nervous because I think trying to figure out new places to go after where it looks like they're going for season 3, basically having returned these people back to life, like undone their deaths and giving them more time on Earth to see if the evolution that they went through in the afterlife does still happen if they're on Earth. Basically confirming, did they only get better because of circumstances that they would never be in on Earth, or are they capable of actually becoming better people on their own? And, so that's a whole new setup. And it has a lot of potential, but I don't know how you shake things up again after 2 major shakeups. And I worry that if it gets a season 4 going to a 4th season, that it's going to be, we're going to be expecting the shakeup. So that's the first thing. But then if you don't do it, does the show become stale? And I get nervous because oftentimes these high concept shows have, several seasons worth of ideas, but then if they keep getting renewed past the initial core ideas, that's when things get repetitive or go off the rails or get weird. But I'm very hopeful for season 3. And the first 2 seasons of this, as far as I'm concerned, are gold. So, I have no complaints. This guy, has no complaints about this show. Not even like I would do with when I did my Why Gotham is Awesome, going, yeah, first season a little wonky. No! It was great. It was great immediately. It stayed great through the whole season. Stayed great through the second season. I'm the guy who finds problem in everything. I always find at least one tiny thing, and no, I got nothing. I love this show. It's wonderful, and I hope that you are watching it if you're still watching this, because I've done massive spoilers of the first 2 seasons. So if you stuck around, you were warned, not my fault. So I'll wrap it up there. The Good Place. First 2 seasons, what do you think about it? Whatever you think, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. There's a whole bunch of stuff to do. There are buttons, and there are links, and there are things for you to check out, including a link to the Patreon. So check them out if you want. And remember, folks, you're the council. I just run the meetings. And until next time, this council is adjourned.